I need some traction. You need some traction.
Hey everybody, Lloyd Lobo here, co-founder at Boast AI and Traction Conf. Super excited for today's session. So the most successful tech IPOs and the fastest growing private SaaS companies of the past decade have one thing in common. They've mostly been product-led organizations. Zoom, Atlassian, Slack, and Peloton are just a few. Product-led organizations represent the future of business in a digital-first world. They put product at the center of their organization to build better customer experiences and to influence priorities. This means that all aspects of sales, marketing, education, service, and support converges inside your product. And this mindset not only helps you build better customer experiences, but it improves collaboration, speeds up innovation, and leads to higher revenues. So I'm super excited today because our speaker is a leader in the product-led movement. He's built Pendo from 0 to $1 billion. Pendo is a product-led experience platform that helps product teams create software that customers love. Who doesn't want to do that? And before Pendo, he was VP of product at Rally Software, which he led through IPO. Todd, thanks for joining us, man. How are you?
I'm awesome.
You've been a 3-time entrepreneur. You've experienced the highs and lows of running fast growth technology companies. You took Rally through IPO. I heard that you were a professional coder by the time you were 14, and you spent your teens working as a database engineer. Tell us about that experience and your journey to Rally and Pendo.
Yeah, so look, I was trying just bored, and my mom was trying to figure out things for me to do. But I was talking to a neighbor, happened to work at a credit card bank, and typical mom bragging about her son about how good I was with computers. Now, for her, good with computers was turning it on. She didn't know what programming was, but it got me the open opportunity. I interviewed and started at the bank, and I quickly gravitated towards solving problems with technology and self-taught how to program. Yeah, it got a little crazy. I started working lots of hours and had to balance schooling and everything else. Getting to the bank every day after school ended up being a big challenge. But I ultimately was there for years, and it was a fun journey around how to learn how to be professional in the software business.
What part of the United States was that in?
Well, the home of credit card banks, Newark, Delaware. I grew up there, and I learned a lot about, well, certainly large enterprises. So it was big trial by fire.
And then you were telling me, the last thing you did at Rally was ring the bell, and then took a couple months off and started Pendo with your friends. What led you to jump from one thing to the other? Because just doing a company and is hard enough, and then taking to IPO is almost impossible. Then you take a couple months break and you start Pendo. What led to that? My
prior startup got bought by Rally, so I think part of it was when you're standing up there and you're looking out and you're thinking about your accomplishments and how you've contributed. It wasn't mine, Yes, I contributed. I helped, but it just honestly inspired me to do it myself. I'll be honest. All it was a motivating event for me. It wasn't like a exhale. It was more of I feel like I have to do this myself. Now that I've seen it and see what's possible, I need to prove to myself more than anything that I can do this. And part of that experience was I was traveling a lot. That company was headquartered outside of my hometown. I was traveling a ton. So I took a break to recharge, spend time with my family, trying to honestly reintroduce myself to my family. It's actually probably the truth of it matter. And I think that's been honestly very, very good for me. And then I started Pendo, and I wanted to do it from scratch. And I wanted it to feel like it was something I did on my own to some degree. I've had a ton of help, of course, but I wanted to take something from idea onward. And I never really considered joining anything, or I just like starting things. I enjoy the process of creation, and I still do. I mean, we're quite a bit bigger than we were those original days, and I still have the same fire and energy. So it's awesome.
Yeah, and you're 450 people, hit the big B valuation, and next stop is New York Stock Exchange again, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a we're on that path. So if all things go well, the markets stay healthy, yeah, that'd be an awesome trajectory. And look, and my goal was to get us create the opportunity. You can't always quite predict what would happens, but like we're definitely in the conversation. We've put us in a position where this is possible, and that feels super good. And there's still a lot of execution. I mean, execution matters a ton, but yeah, we're doing all the right things. It feels good. So
awesome. And you've done that, building a product-led organization and helping hundreds and thousands of companies building product-led organizations. And you have a great talk on it. So I'll let you take it over, Todd.
I think Lloyd started this out, and we talked a little bit about, we talked prior to this about the Peloton, but I think Peloton is just one of the great examples of a product-led business. And I know it's getting a lot of visibility now because in the world we live in and a lot of gym shutdowns around the world, their business has certainly got a boost from that. But the reality is the product is just a great product, independent of the macro climate around us. It shows up, it's configured for you. You literally can snap into the bike and immediately start going with very, very little activity. And then there's a couple of things about the product that is really powerful around driving virality. One of, and I honestly have never been a huge fan of gamification, but this gamification works, like active feedback about streaks and areas to collaborate. It's constantly pinging me and pushing me to up my numbers and to continue, frankly, getting back on that bike. I think the thing that it's driven home for me is consistency. If I do it every single day, I feel better than if I have one monster ride one day a week. And if you think about that, what is that? That's product-led growth. That's virality. And the fact that I do this, and I walk into work or I speak with my friends and I basically talk about how amazing I feel, what my streaks are. And oh, by the way, they also have this fascinating community around their instructors where it's now, social distance cocktail hour conversation of which instructor you like the best. That again is driving virality, right? Because we now have a personal connection with someone in our product. So I just think it's a fascinating thing, and it gives it a great example of what's possible when you put product-led growth front and center. So that's just one story, and that's obviously a consumer story. But as Lloyd mentioned, what Pendo does is we work with a lot of companies who are on their product-led journey. And I've taken a lot of those stories and brought them together into a new book. And I launched that book just last week. It is now available. Go check it out. Love to hear people's reviews and feedback. But the idea of this is, how do we all become a more product-led organization? And you ask yourself, what is a product-led organization? A lot of people equate it to product-led growth. Product-led growth is more well-known. It was coined, I believe, by OpenView Venture Partners. And product-led growth, I think, is a great description of driving this virality. But for me, product-led growth is just one piece of the overall puzzle. Like, it's not just the acquisition conversion side. When I think of being product-led, I think about the retention, I think about self-service and support. I think about a broader definition of that, and that's why that's kind of how I distinguish product-led organization from growth. The other thing I hear a lot about, does this mean that product management is leading my company? Because often when we think of sales-led or marketing-led, we're thinking about the sales departments or marketing departments leading the business. And that's not what I mean by product-led. To me, yes, product management takes a leadership role in a product-led business, but is a leadership role. It's not means the product management team is leading the business. Rather, it's how does the product lead the business? How does the product become the key piece of the overall customer experience. This is essentially what I mean. So when you look at what is a product-led organization, I see it as having the product at the center of the various functions of a business. And in each area of the business should be thinking about, how can I leverage the product to automate a business process or create a better experience for customers, or what have you. And that's everything. Everyone thinks of marketing and sales, but what about CS? What about finance? What about support? What about even recruiting? There's ways to do product-led recruiting for people that are using your product but really want to be part of it. Like, there's a lot of ways that each department can use a product. And I think product-led businesses are the creative in how they do that. And the key thing where I want everyone to start thinking about, and I'll give a bunch of examples throughout this presentation, is how do we shift human-led activities to product-led activities? What are the things that you're doing now that you feel like the product can take off your plate? Now, a lot of these things I would characterize in this bucket of high volume, low value activities. That's one way of thinking of it. The higher the volume and lower the value, this is ripe for automation. So those are the areas that I want you to think about. And look, like, the benefits can be extreme. And this is an Amazon Go store. This is you can see it's a retail experience that has no humans, no cashiers. You literally walk in, you grab your products and walk out. And if you've seen this, is the ultimate example of product-led. And yes, it's an experiment now. There's only a handful of these in the United States and possibly some in Canada. So sorry, I don't know of all the locations, but the reality is that it's unique. And I think it's a good example of what could be to come. Some of these activities, like checking out, for example, is a high volume, low value activity. You're not advising someone on what they should be getting, right? So I think this is a really powerful way of thinking about the future and a good idea of what's possible and how Amazon, which I love here, is pushing the envelope. So what does it mean to be a product-led org? So the first area I want to start with is leveraging data. I think the first step is making sure that you shift your thinking from one solely based on insight to instinct to one based on data. Product-led businesses measure a lot. And when you start measuring a lot, I want everyone to think about what is the goal? What is the end in mind? Like, measuring for measuring's sake is, frankly, it's waste, right? So what's your business case? What are your, again, potentially, a lot of people have different goal setting frameworks. OKRs may be one. There may be talks on OKRs. Pendo actually has had a goal setting framework since we founded the business. We did OKRs the first 4 or 5 years. Now we use a system called Rhythm. Really familiar with scaling up, which is the next generation of the Rockefeller habits. There's a lot of great ones out there, but I think these systems are good because they're forcing you to think of, what are my goals? What do I want to accomplish in a year? And then what do I want to accomplish in a roadmap leading up to those? And they could be a bunch of different candidate goals. You could be trying to lower your customer acquisition costs. You could be trying to reduce your support costs, increase conversion rate, competitive win rates, breadth of adoption, retention. Like, what you're trying to solve helps drive what you should be measuring. I think this is the best place to start. I think most people ask me, hey, what should we be measuring? My first question back is, well, what do you care about? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish as a business? And it changes. When we were a 5-person startup, our goal was to get like 10 reference customers. That was literally the first OKR. Well, that's going to drive a different set of behavior, a different set of product-led actions than where we are today when we're a 450-person company that's, driving, we're thinking a lot more about efficiency as an example than we did, 4 or 5 years ago, right? So these are the things that really, really important to think about. The other thing to think about is that just quantitative data by itself typically isn't enough to drive real insights. You want to marry that with qualitative feedback. I think any one piece of this isn't enough. It's the combination that drives insight. Like, me knowing that I have a, I don't know, positive 40 NPS score, that's interesting. But knowing that the people that gave me negative NPS scores really care about, A, B, and C, well, that's actionable. That's the difference between just data and action, is this marriage of qualitative and quantitative. And this is just an example. The other thing I think is really, really valuable for all of us to think about is, how do we experiment and iterate, right? This is an experiment canvas. A lot of people talk about the word experiment, but a lot of people treat them in undisciplined ways. I'm a huge discipline fan. These canvases are powerful ways to organize your thought. You can, it's great to list your riskiest assumption, write down your hypotheses, talk about, hey, if we saw these results, we would potentially have these conclusions. What that does is that eliminates the risk of adjusting the goals mid-flight based on what you see. You want to be organized. You want to be, again, disciplined on it. But, throughout startups, you're going to have questions. You're going to have uncertainty. The only way to determine future investments is to run experiments to get data to help reduce risk, reduce uncertainty, help inform how to move forward. This is a really, really powerful technique. I think a lot in our business of what are our experiments? Which are the ones we're running now? How does that inform future results, et cetera? So that's the first area, being data-driven. The second area I want to talk about is putting product at the center of the customer experience. I think this is really, really key. If you look at the customer experience, you can see broad aspects of it, everything from the lead gen, trial conversion side, through onboarding, education, training, to renewal, et cetera, even things like cross-sells and upsells. And each department has a hand to play in these various functions. And what's powerful about product-led businesses, you can look at any one of these areas and figure out how the product can support you. And I think, look, today's day and age, we're being driven to be more digital than we ever have before. Just take education and training. I was talking to an insurance company recently where they used to fly all their independent agents to their headquarters in the Midwest to get educated on software releases. Well, guess what? No one's flying anywhere, and frankly, no one wants to be educated live in person. So they have to rewrite their playbook here. That's an area where the education department needs to rethink how they deliver education. They may need to do it in a more product-led way, and that's just one example. Everyone talks about product-led growth and thinks about marketing in terms of like AdWords and conversions and things like that. And of course, all that's very, very important. But one of the simple areas is this notion of references. And here's an example. This is highlighting review sites like G2 Crowd or TrustRadius or other ones. And everyone knows the value of having a good review. Everyone understands the value of, yes, if you deliver a great product, people should review it. But what I don't see is the connective tissue of how do we, as product designers, drive people to write the review, because people don't naturally on their own sit at home on a Friday night and say, I should be really giving a review for that product I really like that I use at work every day. Yeah, no, people are not going to do that, folks. They actually, hopefully, if they have a life, they aren't thinking about your product on a Friday night, and they're too busy during the week to be leaving reviews. So how do you enable this? How do you drive this? Well, you've got to design it in from day one. And yes, I know on iOS and mobile platforms, it's built into the platform. It asks you if you want to do a review, and you can give 1 through 5 star. It can drive you to the app stores, et cetera, et cetera. But on the web, there's nothing like that. So you have to build this into your design. And look, the review site is one example, but also just collecting references. Wouldn't it be valuable just to have a list of references? And oh, by the way, if you're combining it with data, I can get references who I know certain areas or who use certain areas of my product. Like, wow, this is a power user of this area. we need references who can talk to the value of this area of our product. That is really powerful. That's a different way to think about product-led marketing. This chart kind of helps visualize the difference of users who partake in a human-led onboarding process at one of our customers and some versus everyone. And you can see here is that people who've had good onboarding have higher NPS scores. That means their sentiment, what they're willing to say about the product is, in this case, 12 points higher just by sitting through a formal onboarding. So obviously we know that onboarding is really, really, really important. Another example data set here, different customers, similar results is the NPS score is statistically correlates with, again, do they come in early when we're doing onboarding or do they come in late? And think about the power of this, folks. Most of your users ultimately are going to come after the initial sale, especially in a B2B world. People change if you retain them. I mean, look at this. It's a pretty precipitous change. So I think it's really, really important to think about, how do I automate onboarding? How do I not rely on those humans? How do I make sure that a unattended onboarding process delivers the same sentiment as my attended ones? And for that, I think what you should be all thinking about is what are the key moments we want the user to accomplish when they first start with our product? Call them aha moments, call them core events, call them whatever you want. There are some critical events that if you know they do this, then they are more likely to be a sticky customer, sticky user long-term. And like, look, the Facebook example, it's super famous is that, if you make 7 friends in the first 10 days, that they knew they had you hooked. But every product has it, and it may even change, it may evolve, but know this, and then get the user into it. Build a guided tour. Like don't just drop your brand new user in a blank slate product and say, have at it, good luck. It's not going to drive the right outcome. So what you want to do is when someone starts using you for the first time, you have these aha moments, get the user experience it as quickly as humanly possible, right? This is another example of the Dropbox, save one file, one device. They knew they had you hooked. So what they do, they got you saving one file on one device. Don't leave it up to the imagination. Just make it a reality. It's a perfect example of product-led. Another example that I like to give is self-service. What happens when someone's in your product and they can't find something or they have a question? One of the classic examples I go back to is I was got a bunch of kids during one of my most recent ones, birth. I was going into my HR platform on a weekend to add my new child as a dependent because these hospital bills come in. You want to make sure insurance covers it. Pretty classic use case. I could not figure it out. Literally could not figure it out. And I was like, come on, you software all day. Maybe I'm just a little tired. And no, I spent a good 15, 20 minutes looking for this thing. And that is frustration. So now I went from being like, I like this thing to now I'm kind of pissed off. It's my Saturday. I'm investing time in this thing to do something that it's not adding a lot of value. Yes, I want to be covered by insurance, but it's not like it's providing me joy. I ended up having to call support, speak with a human, which then after showing me how it's done, I feel a little bit like an idiot. I'm not going to lie to you, which doesn't feel good to be feeling like an idiot that, I had to call someone. They did teach me how to do it. Yes, I guess if I read better, I could have figured this out. But no, come on. That should not have occurred. So all of you should be thinking about those moments. If you have moments, if you're, one of the hacks I recommend to product teams is sit next to your support team, do rotations for a couple hours a day for a week. See what people ask about. If you have a phone, see what people call about. You'll be outraged because what people are calling about are maybe obvious to you, but they certainly are not obvious to your users. And these are areas of opportunity where you can come in and drive a product-led support system. So if you know certain things are commonly asked questions, show them in the product. Don't make them go somewhere else. If you have a little question mark in the corner and someone can say, how do I, add a dependent? It tells me immediately how I did it. I would have felt smarter. I would have felt better. I would have saved myself time. I would have saved the company money because they didn't have to have a human on the other end of the phone answering my call, right? Think about the value of this. This is what I think the power of product-led is. And it's honestly so easy to do. So that's the second main point. The third main point I want to cover is a new way of delivering product. The reality is the way we ship software in 2020 is vastly different than when I started my career. You know, as you heard from Lloyd, I started my career when I was 14. So, and I'm definitely not 14. So like, 30 years later, I am still delivering software, and yes, it's wildly different. And one of the biggest differences is release. You know, I did work at a company once in my career where we literally shipped CDs, boxes. I had to design a box once that felt very surreal, but we don't do that anymore. Most of our software is cloud-driven. Most of it's pretty instantaneous. That's one of the powers and excitements about why I love building software is the reach is nearly instant. So it creates larger TAMs, very exciting. But yeah, literally we used to spend a lot of time building, then we would ship. Our ability to take feedback, our ability to experiment was very much hampered. Now, you should be thinking about how do you leverage a controlled release process to drive better outcomes. That's, you know, one of the classic ones. We typically ship all things internally first. That means our employees get to play around with it. We catch a few bugs, we get feedback. That's a great way to think about it. Then we go to some closed beta. These are people that are customers who identify themselves as wannabe closed betas. That means they are comfortable with a few bugs. They have time to give me feedback. That's a really powerful way, because here's the thing, if you go right to GA, you could have some customers who are not comfortable with like unvetted software trying it out. And by doing this, you actually can go faster. You could ship faster. You're not to say that you want your customers to be finding your bugs and QAing for you, but if you can ship with a different level of quality, if you have a controlled release process, and then something like open beta is also very powerful. You can do controlled rollouts in percentages. I know obviously Etsy made a lot of these build processes famous back in the day when they shipped many times per day and they could roll back. That's a very advanced use case, but these are powerful ways to think about shipping that. Each step allows you to iterate, collect data, improve, and make sure you nail it when you ship it. The other big thing that you need to think about in terms of delivering product is managing feedback. You know, once you ship something, people are going to have opinions. They're going to have ideas. They're going to have complaints. They're going to have new feature requests. They're going to have lots of things. And as a company, you want all that feedback. If someone has feedback, you want it. Those are learnings. Those are good. But in today's day and age, you're going to get them on Slack. You're going to get them on email. You're going to get them over Zoom calls, phone calls. You're going to get support tickets. And what the risk is that you end up with hundreds of spreadsheets with lots of different lists. I've got CS's lists. I've got products lists. I've got sales lists. How do you manage all these lists? It's chaos. Right? So you want to think about, how do I centralize it? How do I organize it? Because if you centralize and organize, the other thing you can do is centralize and organize communication. For example, if a customer or user asks for something, well, it's a great opportunity to tell them you listened. Like, most of the time, customers just want to hear they were listened to. But if you actually ship that thing that they wanted, you are missing out if you don't finish that feedback loop. Tell them you shipped it. Get the credit. There's nothing better from a customer that asks for something and have it shipped. But if you don't tell them, you're leaving that feedback loop completion up to the end user, and that's asking a lot of your users. Do not do that. This is a perfect opportunity to find ways to manage this. It'll create much better outcomes, much higher sentiment. Now, we talked a lot about orchestration. We've talked a lot more about like changing the way we release. This has created new opportunities in organizations, and this new role we see called product operations or product ops or prod ops, depending on how you want to shorten it. It's this connective tissue. It's this organizing body. It sits often within the product org, but it works cross-functionally with engineering and potentially customer success, maybe even sales. And their job is to make sure that there is organization across the product. If you have lots of teams trying to drive product-led motions, could be product-led support, could be product-led growth, who makes sure that the ultimate end experience isn't crazy for the end user? Who makes sure that the data is cohesive? Who makes sure that people aren't stepping on each other's toes as they're doing all this work? This is how I see this product ops role evolving. It's all around alignment. It's all around orchestration. It's a really powerful way. And I think it's critical for product-led organizations that you have something like this within your business. So look, I hope I gave a lot of examples on how being product-led is a lot more about growth. It's about leveraging data for product decisions. Again, the shift from instinct and intuition to insights and data. The second is putting product at the center of the customer experience. How can we leverage the product to automate certain business functions? And the third is adjusting how you deliver to accommodate those two areas. And what ends up happening is that, another way of think about it metaphorically is your product should be wearing a lot of different hats. And it can wear a lot of different hats if you think of it in this way. So look, I'm going to challenge, and I said earlier, what can your product offload from your departments or from your humans? What low value, high volume work can the product help with? And then, I'll end with a great story. It's a company called Toast. It's a company that I know fairly well because we're collaborating with them. But, look, if any business is being affected in the last 6 to 9 months, is it 6 months? I think it's 6 months. Wow, 6 months has flown by. It's companies that are serving the restaurant industry. So this is a point of sale system traditionally. But look, COVID hits and the restaurant industry is very, very affected. And point of sale took a back seat to takeout and self-service and starting to rethink their experience. Also, because of just the overall macroeconomic impact, they had a layoff and had reduced headcount. So they were in a situation where their customers are hurting. So they had to scramble and pivot and find ways to help their customers because they care very passionately about their customers, and that's awesome. And they have to scramble to adjust products to make sure their products are serving the new needs of customers as their customer needs are evolving. And they have to do this with fewer people. That's hard. That's really, really, really hard. And when you see this, you have to employ product-led motions to do this. And that's been a big part of their strategy, is shifting to more product-led service and support and more product-led activity onboarding, to allow them to still provide amazing service and really help their customers survive one of the most challenging times their customers have probably ever experienced, and still come out on the other side. And I think those done a marvelous job. They continue to help the industry, but as well as continue to grow themselves. And kudos to them. But that's just a great example of how product-led isn't just about driving growth. It's about helping you survive really, really, really challenging times. With that, thank you.
Awesome. That was fantastic. I learned a ton, and this is amazing. Now, I want to dive into a little bit. What if you have a startup and that's not product-led, right? There's a lot of sort of non-product-led companies here. They start with enterprise, and we did an actual awesome session on reverse freemium, by the way, a few months ago with Audrey, who's the head of product at Calendly, and Michael Litt, Vidyard CEO. But yeah, what's your take on that? If you've been selling sort of top down, how do you bring this mindset into your team? Because it's like you have to force it in.
Yeah, no, and actually Pendo, we've we do sell product led. We know it really, really well. And there's a big part of our product that is product led, but we still have some motion that was very sales oriented. And I often tell the story, we're a bit of a victim of our own success. Like sales really worked, and if sales is working and you're growing, like you tend to ignore other things, especially when you're small. Small means you focus. If one thing's working, why add in another thing? So, but look, I think it's never too late to add product-led motions. There's different ways of thinking about it. Onboarding is the classic way. That was the area we've always had to be product-led, because even if we have a salesperson sell it, we're going to have users join our product all the time. So you have to, so onboarding is a classic. And if you fix onboarding, now that helps your new user experience. You can start experimenting with freemium. You can start experimenting with other things. I mean, look, you have a lot of questions around like the, I think if you have an existing sales channel and you have sales comp, you're going to have questions from your sales team when you add freemium. Yeah. You're going to have fear too.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of understanding what is the goal of free, and then getting your internal stakeholders comfortable with it. Like that's probably the biggest thing, but I think it's very, very, very possible, assuming the market allows it. Some people say some markets don't allow it as much, but I think COVID taught us that we're going to do a lot more virtual than we thought we're going to do. So I think now is as good as time as ever to think about, if you haven't done it, what is it? How do you add on a product-led motion?
Yeah, and product-led doesn't necessarily mean free. It just means everything is effectively driven by the product and converges in the product, right? This is an interesting take. You've heard of Superhuman, obviously.
Yeah.
And although they have a very product-led company, they do 100% of their onboardings with humans.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah. So I was literally, thank you for bringing that up, because I was literally just talking about this like a couple hours ago. So like, so is Superhuman product-led or not? And I would argue they are. They just take a different flavor than everyone else does, right? Everyone has this like Hey versus Superhuman. Hey has this like really, really pristine built onboarding solution, and Superhuman didn't do that. They had a human do it. Now, is that what's going to be like all the time? I don't know, but like what I like what they did is they realized that speed matters as a startup. And for them, it is actually just faster to throw a human on to understand and experiment with what's working out. Now, I'll also say though, when I'm a Superhuman customer, by the way, so like I have gone through this. They follow up with a lot of emails. They have a drip campaign afterwards, which is very much product-led. It's like, hey, and it's a progressive disclosure onboarding. So like they teach you the handful, and then you get an email like every day actually after you start, and it introduces a new feature. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? They also do little tool tips in their product. Like for example, they have this like introduction feature where if I want to do like a BCC and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of an automated hotkey. Every time I reply, they remind me, hey, you can reply this way, which again is product-led suggestions, right? So they do a lot of product-led things. But yeah, I also do wonder though, Lloyd, how much of the human process is just a way to get more press and drive more marketing because they're so unique. People like unique, and I do wonder if it's just part of what's driven some of their growth so that people experience it. So
that's what he said. He said we'll get to 100 million revenue with 70 onboarding specialists, and it's unique because he's like self-service doesn't always work because it's very hard to spot churn and automate that process. And here you're white gloving it, and people feel they're part of the mission, the cult, or whatever you want to call it. There, let's switch over to Pendo. Day one, when you started the company, you came up with the MVP. Did you have? I mean, of course, you're building this company to help other companies become product-led, but were you guys a product-led company from day one?
Well, very day one, yes. We kind of threw it out there. We let people play around with it. we're tiny. So yeah, it was 100% product led. I think that the challenge we started having, and when we started to employ a sales motion, and I did it myself, was that we were so unique in that, part of our special sauce is that we combine usage analytics with in-app messaging, and no company before had combined those two things in one package. So like a customer would go to use it and they wouldn't quite understand why these two things were in one package. And it took me explaining it. Once I explained it, everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's really cool. I love it. I want to try it. So, and that started working. So what happened was I started selling, and every time I did it, it helped drive conversions. So, and then I did it a few times, and I taught more people how to do it, and more people how to do it. So then you end up with a sales team that's, selling a lot of product, and we've more than doubled pretty much every year since we started. So, until most recently, as we're at scale now, but as I said that, like I said, we've had pretty much an automated onboarding process since day one, and we continue to refine it and adjust it. We've had in-app self-service from nearly day one. We have one of those widgets for like finding help articles, things like that. We've done that since day one. So we do have a lot of product-led areas of our business, even areas. We do some pretty cool things. So within the product itself, like driving, I mentioned references and advocates. Every user on their 1-year anniversary of using Pendo gets asked, what are your favorite things and would you be an advocate? So that's an area where we've been using product-led advocacy for a long time in the company's history.
That's pretty cool. Did you build that in yourselves, or is that a feature available within Pendo to enable?
Yeah, it's a feature within Pendo. Like it's really, really easy. And honestly, that's connected to a Slack channel where I get to read these things. And you know what? Talking about give me a boost in the middle of the day. Imagine like every customer or user has been there for a year telling you what they love about your product. Like that feels really good. And trust me, we as entrepreneurs, you need those days like to counteract all the other things that are occurring, right? So that feels really, really good. So that's just one of the great examples. So there's been aspects of our business product led since day one. So, but yet we still have sales. So even to this day. So.
But like, to be honest, if you got a good product that's self-service that people can use, or in some ways trial, then those people become, I guess, product qualified leads for salespeople, and it's less headache. They're more familiar with your brand and usage, and sales is acting more like a consultant to close them versus like cold calling, cold emailing, and try to warm them through, right?
I think that's closer to our model. And honestly, the other big thing is pricing. Like, because our model is so unique, pricing, it's not a commodity. I think it's really, really hard just to like throw things out there. We don't price like everyone else's does. Now we have why behind it. But it's sophisticated. And sometimes helps if a human explains it. So it's an area where I'd love to find ways to automate more. And I think as we grow, we're going to create simpler packaging. But it's something that I think that's also driving part of the product-led growth challenges is just pricing. So the transaction sets. So, like annual subscriptions.
Yeah.
Like convincing someone to sign up for a year versus a month is very, very different. And a lot of our financial forecasts are people signing up for a year. Like that's like a great SaaS thing, right? But it does absolutely affects people to convert. So there's a connection there.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you mentioned the turning customers into advocates. I think that's, amongst other things, I think that's also should be a key deciding factor in buying Pendo. I mean, it's hard to build that in, right? Like tracking who advocates and then who refers, and like just tracking that whole mechanism. Awesome. Yeah, I'm giving you guys a plug, and I think I'm going to try Pendo for Boast as well in the next couple of weeks.
Perfect. Sounds good. You're welcome. Yeah. You need help, let me know, Lloyd.
I will for sure. At what point did you know you had product market fit?
I cite this frequently, but not in a while. There's a great article by Brad Feld on product market fit. Just Google like product market fit, Brad Feld. Like it's my favorite. I swear, I think I read that article like 3 times a day, every day for like 6 months. So like I was just like maniacally focused on this thing, and it really helped me. Obviously, first paying customer, definitely not. I think probably. I can tell you time frame. Halfway into like 2014 is when I probably knew we had product market fit. Maybe our Series A helped. In our Series A, what the interesting about that, we weren't actively raising capital. I met with a few VCs, and VC called me up and said, "Hey, we really want to invest." I was like, "Well, why?" We weren't, again, I wasn't raising, and he said, "We've done a ton of back channel reference calls, and we can't find a customer saying anything bad about you."
That's amazing.
And that's when I knew we had something. That felt pretty good, because here's the thing, I'm not calling it. I mean, look, we knew we had happy customers, but I didn't like back channel all of them, or I didn't ask all. And I think once we had that, we knew we had something going on, and that's probably a big piece. I think the other big sign is when I could hire like a sales rep off the street and get them productive pretty fast, and they got them. Like once it was clear, we could kind of, and some people say that that's not the nail it, that's to scale it, but it did feel a little bit of like the nailing it phase. Just honing that process was really, really tight. But yeah, I mean, look, I still wake up every day wondering if we're going to lose it, and you're always like hyper focused on it. I think in Brad Feld's article, he said you can lose product market fit or you can evolve it, and so I'm very, very passionate around that. But
yeah, and effectively, every time you release something new product, new feature, it's like you have to get product market fit again. I'm going through that as well. I mean, founder-led sales, effective. Like one of the founders is the product leader. You talk to customers, get feedback, and you're basically seeing that baby till it can run on its own, and then you hire salespeople. The worst I've seen in my past company is you hire salespeople when you don't have product market fit. They can't earn commissions. Customers are churning. It's horrible.
Yeah, I've been there, done that, Lloyd. That's not the most fun thing. That was my second startup. We just did a lot of things wrong. And here's the thing: if we had just been given time to get the product market fit, like then we would have gone so much faster. But there was this like, you gotta have patience, and it's hard to be patient and being an entrepreneur. Like we're just inherently impatient human beings. But I think that was one of the best things we did. We gave ourselves permission year one to not sell anything. Now we did sell something, but we gave ourselves permission to not. So I felt like we were taking it in a very disciplined way. I didn't ask for a long time until it was like very clear someone would say yes. And I think that kind of helped us because it forced us to get the product in a place where it really could sell. And then it kind of took off from there. So the more patient you are in the beginning, the better results you're going to get long-term, I think.
Definitely. We touched on onboarding a lot, but I want to get into you guys' onboarding in the early days. A lot of people, initially talk about acquisition. How do you get a user to sign up? And then in between with the growth movement, there was a lot of focus around retention, but really the key piece between like signing up and retain long-term happy customer is onboarding. And a key part of that is getting users to, get that aha moment or experience something that they came looking for. How did you get people to that moment in your early days? Or maybe post Series A?
Yeah, look, I think that the first thing to ask yourself, again, this depends on the product, but our product's sophisticated. It's an enterprise product. That means is that each customer may want a different outcome, or may have a slightly different use case. So the first thing you do is you got to create case-driven onboarding. Like, what do you want to accomplish, Mr. Customer? Give them like a choose your own adventure. Like one of those classic books, if you remember when you were a kid, it's like, hey, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to do this. Okay, this is how you use Pendo to do this. And they get people in, like take them to the water, so to speak, rather than give them the water. I think that, we had guided tours that were use case driven very early in the company's history. And it's like, these are the 4 reasons people buy Pendo. Let's get you in and show you how to do it. And I think that's been very, very beneficial. All of our data shows that people who follow the guided tours onboard more effectively. So I think those are kind of the key things we've done in the past. I mean, and we're constantly iterating on it. Our product changes. You said it. Every time you ship something new, you should be rethinking your onboarding. We introduced the notion of like goals a few years in, and like I was like, wow, this needs to be the first thing people do. Like, go in and articulate your goals. But that changed the entire onboarding process because we didn't have them at first, right? So I think those are the ways to kind of think about it is based on role, based on use case, be very prescriptive of what you want to do people to do immediately. And that's kind of what we've done day one.
I want to dive into this ability to get more references. I mean, is creating an awesome product enough, or what are some loops that you have done, and how can we use Pendo to get some loops to drive more customer references? We touched on it a little bit with the customer advocates, but how do you do that?
Well, look, the loop I showed in my presentation, like the easiest loop is if someone gives you a positive survey result, whether it's NPS or CSAT or whatever customer effort score, I don't care what it is. If they give you a good one, say, hey, thank you, and would you like to give us a review? So it's like you're more likely to get someone to convert if you ask them in the moment when they said something positive than not. Now, obviously, don't ask people that don't give you high scores. That would probably lead to a bad outcome. But lead people. That's a great way of thinking about it. The other thing you can do is this kind of depends how you define aha moment or even like PQL. If someone accomplishes something and they get good results, let's say your product knows they just did something and it was successful. Like for example, we have these in-app messaging. Think of them as a campaign. We know when campaigns work. Imagine having, hey, this thing would just drive amazing results. Congratulations. Oh, by the way, do you want to do a review? That's a great way to do it. The other thing that I think is really powerful around advocates is if we recommend is like get a list of all the users who are power users of certain areas. Like I said a little bit earlier, like I know they use this thing. Then personalize the message. So it's like, hey, we know you're a strong user of this. Would you mind being a reference for that? It's new, and give them something in return. In return, we'll help you shape the roadmap of this thing. That sort of thing. That's very powerful. One, people want, again, to shape roadmaps. They want to partner with you. That's really, I think, important. That gives them an owner mentality of the feature. If they're an owner, you got them hooked. But then the second piece is by when you send the message by contextualizing it to the fact that the person's a power user, you're more likely to get a response. If you just message everyone and say, hey, please tell us if you'll be a reference, very different thing. I know you're a power user here. Congratulations, customer. You're awesome. Like, please be a reference for us. You're just going to get better results. So like those are just I don't know, those are some easy techniques to drive references.
Awesome. Last one I'll take on onboarding is, how do you ensure people go through the onboarding? I'm notorious for speeding through and not using it. So how do you get people to stick through it? And that's probably some hooks you have in your product there, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, one, you can't force someone to do something they don't want to do. So if you speed through it, fine. I mean, what are you going to do? I think the key is don't give up. And like little suggestions matter a lot, right? So okay, someone speeds through it, they don't really pay attention to it. And look, we actually you can actually measure read time and things like that. So you can know whether people are speeding through it, and you can know whether there's a correlation with speed versus not and improving outcomes. I do think that does matter. But look, don't see the initial guided tour as the only bite of the apple. Remind them again if they haven't done something. This is an area where knowing whether someone's done something or not is really, really helpful. Like, hey, you've been using the product for 10 days now. You haven't touched this yet. Do you want us to remind you of how that works? Right? If someone doesn't done something that you know is really, really important, you know it's going to lead to an aha moment, drive them to it, right? So I think you have every right to do that. Now look, there's going to be onboarding for trials and onboarding for paid customers. They are a little bit different at how often you want to message. If it's a trial, I'd err inside it more. Paid customer, you want to be thoughtful. But if someone's in the product and you can kind of measure that they're not accomplishing what you want them to, tell them that. People want feedback. So, but don't see the initial onboarding as the only opportunity.
What are some of the downsides you've seen from going product led versus humans in the loop?
Well, I mean, you already mentioned it was people would just fly through it. You can't control it, so that's a little bit irritating. And I guess I didn't. There are some technical things that you can of course do. I can block the rest of the page. That would be one way of doing it. But I'm not necessarily a huge advocate in every case. I do think there are some white glove experiences that are harder to be product led, and some of these are more like very consumery businesses, things like that. I mean, they're as I always say, like when you walk into a Ritz-Carlton, like it's hard to change, like hard to make a mobile app feel that special. So like that's a personalization. The other thing is like, don't make it irritating. Another example I've given recently is based on, my parents. My parents were trying to get a coupon at a grocery store, and they were forced to do a product-led motion. They're forced to download an app, get a QR code. Like when product-led is way more painful than the manual thing, like that's not good. And they didn't know their audience either. Those are bad examples of product-led, or even product-led onboarding that may leave your customers in a bad shape. So I think those are two. I guess the other thing about onboarding specifically is if it's super confusing and complicated enterprise software to set up. I don't know, you set up a manufacturing system. Yeah. You don't want them to go through a 200-step guided tour. Like it may be easier to get on the phone with a human and like map it out. Yeah. But, so those are some of the highlights.
Cool. And I had a question about email. Email is a big driver for a lot of things like reminders and adoption. I mean, effectively, 90% of our traction attendees come through getting direct emails. Is there a way to enable that from Pendo, or is it all just in product stuff?
There's some email, yeah. And then we also integrate with other email systems that exist out there. So we do both.
Have you heard of any companies or examples that have tried to go with the product-led model and failed? Or how do you see this failing? Like you've got a ton of customers. I'm sure there are some customers who haven't been successful. Any trends or learnings in customers? I think
the biggest thing is when someone says they want to be product-led and then clearly don't, right? They don't invest in design. They don't invest in user experience. They get you like a quarter of the way through the process and force you to talk to a human. I mean, those things are like mind-numbing. When you're like in your half-baked, that's failure. Either look, it's okay to be incremental, but do something and do it well, and then build on it. So I think those are the biggest antipatterns of people just like do a really crappy job. So
because you could be a product that requires human touch significantly, like we do, but what we're thinking through is like, how do you build features that you can push out as complete product led, and then when they need a human, they just transition to that part of the product, right?
Make it easy, make it beautiful, make it like if it's in product, it's like, hey, do you want to talk to someone right here? Oh yeah, like that can be a pleasant experience. Yeah, right. Just make it pleasant. There are ways to engage, integrate humans into the product process that's still elegant.
I'll take the last question here. What if you're a startup that doesn't have any data to analyze? Does this impact your approach to product led? I think in the beginning, nobody has data. You have assumptions.
Yeah, you've got assumptions. So make sure you're collecting data and try to provide experience that you yourself like. Always pute yourself in the industry, have empathy, try it yourself. That's probably how I do it. So, but like, look, the second you launch, you're going to get data. So, I mean, if you don't have data, launch faster, get something out there. So, I like shipping. So,
how often do you guys ship?
a couple times a week now. Like, for a while, it was almost every day. It's not every day now, but ship a lot.
And are you guys on like a Kanban motion or like a agile sprint motion?
Yeah, we have more of a sprint motion, but some teams are on Kanban. We let teams decide the motion they want to work. So like each team can kind of pick what makes sense for them. But most people are on a sprint cadence.
Looking back at your entrepreneurial journey, anything you wish you did more of and you wish you did less of?
I will say I don't have a lot of regrets. I've had that experience where I shipped the software and didn't iterate and didn't obsess over product as much. Hence, we did things very, very different at Pendo. So I think that's one of the areas where definitely spend more time in product. Spend less time with crappy people. Like I didn't set a high enough bar earlier in my career. I set a high bar now. Like, don't waste your time with people that aren't worth it. It's probably the biggest thing. It's very easy to do that. A lot of people want your time. Like, treasure that time like it's your most valuable resource. That's probably the biggest piece of advice. So
awesome. And you guys have a free product in beta. Can you tell us more about that? What is that?
Yeah, it's a free version of Pendo. It's for smaller companies, but it's pretty much full feature. I think maybe missing some of the more advanced stuff that arguably smaller companies wouldn't need. But yeah, it's in beta now. We're just polishing some of the.
Get me on the beta, Todd. I'm going to email you. Get me on the beta. Let me try that. We're a small company, 35 people. I'm excited. Awesome.
Done.
This has been fantastic. I learned a ton. I'm sure everyone else learned a ton. Thanks everyone for joining us. This session is brought to you by Boast AI Launch Academy in partnership with Founder Institute, BCF Ventures, and Lazaridis Institute.
I need some traction.